Welcome to Ben Navarez podcast with your host, Ben Navarez.
So what else did you do during training today?
That was my morning conditioning, then went into the gym, and I had work up to like a 3-rep max, not a max, but like a 3-rep heavy deadlift for the day. And then I had some, do you know the workout DT?
I do not.
It's kind of like a benchmark CrossFit workout. I had some, the actual workout itself is 5 rounds for time, 12 deadlifts, 12 deadlifts, 9 hang power cleans, 6 shoulder to overhead at 105, 145 maybe for guys, 105. Yeah, I think that's 145. But so I had some intervals of that today, but at heavy weight. So I did 145 and I did 15 deadlifts, 10 hang power cleans, 5 shoulder to overhead. For time, rest 5 minutes, 3 rounds of that.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Why so heavy?
That's the CrossFit.
So, I mean, like, why did you choose to go heavy over what the normal protocol would be? Like 105 is the normal, you did 145. What is your current goal?
Yeah, so I mean, I do whatever my coach tells me to do,
Okay.
but the purpose of it is like DT is a benchmark workout, but obviously that's just like a workout, and so I'm not training specifically to do DT, but I was just asking if you had heard of that workout, just because you'd be like, oh yeah, like deadlift, hang power clean, shoulder overhead. But yeah, they've had different iterations of DT. They had heavy DT at the games, which was at 145, and you know, they could program something similar, or, you know, moving that weight of 145 on the barbell is like pretty like a standard weight for the women at the semis and games level.
Got it. The more that you know, the more that you learn.
Yeah. That's the cool thing about CrossFit is like sometimes you have to move really light weights and sometimes you have to move really heavy weights. So there's purpose in training both.
It seems that there's so much to train all the time.
Yeah, there is.
Constantly, like the 6-minute max row, and then to go into some heavy barbell cardio, if
the
you
deadlifts
will,
too.
And deadlifts.
Yep. I did the 3-rep max deadlift. Not like a true max out, but like a heavy for the day.
Like an 8 or whatever. Like a
right. Yeah.
What is like? Where are you at in this in your current cycle?
Well, basically, if you're not familiar with the CrossFit season, we have what's called the start of the season, which is the CrossFit Open, which just ended. So anybody in the world can sign up and do the Open. There's no like pre-rec or anything, and it's global. You just do the workout in your gym. It's 1 workout a week for 3 weeks. And then after the 3 weeks, they take the top 25% in the world, and those people move on to what's called quarterfinals. So that will be in 3 weeks from now, and it's very similar to the Open. You still just do it in your gym, and you submit your scores online, video review, all that. But instead of 1 workout a week, it's typically 5 to 6 workouts in 1 weekend. So you'll have like from, I think it's Wednesday night until Monday night, and they'll release the workouts and you have to submit the scores within that time frame.
That volume goes from like very manageable to rather difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely a step up from the Open, but I think for most people, especially if you're, on the upper end of that 25%, like you're doing pretty much a workout every day anyways. And so to have from Wednesday to Monday to do 5 workouts, it's really not that much compared to like how much we're training. And then, fast forward to it gets progressively harder each step of the season, as far as the volume goes. So after quarterfinals, you're kind of split into your regions, so where you live, and then they take the top 40 from each region from quarterfinals to the semifinals, and those are the in-person competitions. And those ones are even more intense because that's 3 days long, and there's typically 7 workouts in those 3 days. And those are like, you have to do them at a specific time. You have your heat times and all that. Whereas the quarterfinals is a little bit more volume, but you could still have the flexibility to come into the gym whenever you want. You can redo a workout if you need to and all of that.
During those 3 days, are you seeing workouts that are less than 20 minutes long usually, or can they vary in terms of like I'm working out for, I think I remember seeing this like some sort of like longer swim at some point. It's maybe I'm entirely wrong, but a while ago I saw a fairly long swim. Is that something that could be seen and that's going to take longer than 20 minutes, 30, 45 minutes, or are most of them going to be within that 20-minute range? Yeah,
I would say specifically for the open and quarterfinals level, the workouts are going to be anywhere like short end. There haven't been too many workouts, if any, that are less than like 4 minutes, and those are usually pretty rare. And then I would say on the longer end, like up to 20, maybe 25 minutes, but those would be like a very long workout. So this year in the open, there was the first workout, which, the top athletes were doing in 6 minutes or so. And then there was a 20-minute AMRAP. So that was kind of the range there. And I'd say that's pretty standard. Even up through semifinals and the games. At the games is where sometimes they'll get a little fancy and they will have those longer like swim endurance type events that could be, pushing that hour. They did a marathon row one year, which I believe was like a 3-hour time cap. And that was by far the longest event they've done. Yeah. Like
what you have to be able to access in your physiology just across the board has to be so diverse. And I think it makes it rather intimidating to come into the sport and be like, okay, I want to achieve the games. I want to get to this level, but almost how can I do all of these things? And it's not even like kind of well.
Yeah.
It's really well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. 'Cause then you could have to max out the deadlift the next day or the snatch or something. Right. And, I read somewhere recently that was talking about, it was like an endurance blog or something that I was reading, and it was talking about how as a newcomer into the sport, like it's kind of important to be strong enough first, before you really start developing that engine. And of course, everybody's going to have different backgrounds and, genetics and things like that. But I thought that was a pretty interesting way to look at it because it's so true. It's like you could have one of the best engines in the world, and if you can't move a 145-pound barbell, like we were just talking about, like go home, basically, and that's it is kind of like, although it is definitely an endurance sport, you have to be really strong to even just get your foot into the door.
I so bad want genetics to not play so much of a role. I know it does, but I want that movie of the person who's like, the underdog who's going in there, who's like really trying to grind it out and like, no, I'm going to do it. And like everyone doesn't believe in them because they just aren't fast enough. They aren't strong enough. And then like the next scene is them like demolishing that work. And I realized that there's a lot of time in between those two realities. But
I feel like that is me in some ways. And I know some people will probably look at me and my athletic history and be like, oh, well, you have great genetics. But I've always kind of felt that underdog in my identity, because I don't feel like I'm the person to like just be like a freak athlete, like I'm athletic because I've been an athlete my whole life and I've kind of like forced myself into it. And, like I've been kind of going after this goal of making it to the CrossFit Games now this will be my 9th season, competing at the semifinals or above level. And there's some people that come in, they're like, oh, I just started CrossFit 2 years ago. And then they make it to the games, and that's like a whole other level of genetics. Right. And so I kind of consider myself in that, not quite as genetically gifted pool.
I am fucking rooting for you that much more. I mean,
Thank you.
It would be super neat to be able to like, I think it's a good statement. Like if you stay consistent and you really, really work hard, it doesn't really matter. You know, I always thought of like for me, it was always the intelligence side. It's like, I'm not smart enough. I'm not smarter than anybody else, but I stayed in school long enough that I could achieve these things.
Yeah, I felt the same way in school too.
It was like, I think that's so much of what most people are. And yeah, sure, I think that there are definitely those outliers that are 2 years and they get to achieve that large amount of success. But I would say the majority of individuals, it just takes time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stay committed?
I think at the end of the day, I just really love what I do and I love the challenge of it. And so, yes, I have this, outcome-based goal that I'm going after, and it's kind of like my North Star. But I think a long time ago, I really had to I always talk about how a previous coach of mine asked me, I was kind of going through a tough time, and he was like, well, what would you do if you knew you'd never make it to the games? And I was like, shit, that was at the time I was like, what do you mean? That's not even a reality, but it is a reality because there's so many, no matter how hard you work, there are certain aspects of being in a competitive sport against other athletes that you just don't have a control over. You have to do better than those other people, and you don't have control over those other people. So I can only control how to maximize myself as an athlete. So anyways, I mean, after I kind of got over the shock of that, I was like, honestly, I feel like I would be doing the same thing, even if I knew that I'd never make it, because I really love the work and I love the challenge of improving myself and pushing those boundaries, and also inspiring other people and empowering them to go after things that are scary and challenging in their lives as well. So that's something that really drives me to teach others and help others as I'm coming up as well.
And so oddly uncomfortable all at the same time. Not just the scary thing, not just the hard thing, but on a day-to-day basis. Constantly uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's true.
I'm not stretching enough. I'm not doing this enough. It feels like, do you ever feel like, at what point, so I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. So through a lot of therapy, trying to get out of this, I'm gonna apply my worth to my success in my sport, or to these numbers, I feel like that's the opposite of what an athlete does. Is it hard for you to assign your own personal value outside of your success in your current sport?
Definitely. And I think anybody who's done anything feels that, and I think myself, through the last 9 years that I've been seriously competing in CrossFit, you go through those learning phases. And I think that I don't know if it's human nature, but you feel a sense of you're owed something, right? You put in work and you expect a result. And so trying to separate that result from something that is ultimately not your control, and like you said, your worth, from something that's not your control, because that's just a path that even if you were to succeed and, reach those goals, what do you have the day after you've achieved that? What are you then? Are you just that one day yesterday that you did the thing? Or what kind of person are you the next day? And so finding value and your self-worth in things that are in your control and that you can be proud of, no matter what the, external result, I guess, is.
There's just so many external points of reference. Mm-hmm. As an athlete, not just the numbers, but it's the either the medal or the social media impact or influence. There's so many external points of reference. How do you manage to bring yourself into this is just what I'm doing now and not who I am entirely? Are you doing meditations? Are you practicing any sorts of things like that? Is it your community? What are some things that bring you, I guess, home?
Yeah, I think that really knowing what your own values are as a person and what you like, the type of person that you want to be. First of all, just thinking of that, because I think a lot of people go through their life without really thinking about that too much. And it changes too, I think, as you get older. And so trying to figure out what those values are and what's important to you and what does that look like on a day-to-day basis, and trying to embody that. And I think that brings me a lot of fulfillment, just living true to my values. And in addition to that, like, just knowing that, even when it really sucks when you give it your best effort and it's like not enough for me, that's to make it to the CrossFit Games. But something that is totally in my control is like knowing that I did everything that I could in my power to put me in the best position that I could be. And so just having to almost like surrender the outcome, I guess, is like, and I'm not perfect at it. And I don't think it's something that's like ever, totally achievable. Maybe it is. Maybe I just haven't got to that level yet. But for it to not feel disappointing even when you don't achieve that, but just knowing like, and like you were talking about, like the grind kind of like day in and day out, like that's the hard stuff. And yeah, sure, it's hard to show up at a competition and like, the workouts are really hard and all that. But like at that point, the work's pretty much done. And it's the stuff that you do every single day. It's like being on point with your nutrition, being on point with your sleep, being on point with your stress levels, which is kind of tough because that's something that's very like a moving target each day, like you have family stuff, you have adult stuff, you have chores, you have your
stupid chores,
your tire goes flat, and that kind of stuff. It seems silly, but like as an athlete, you're literally trying to like maximize in every way. And the more that you can recover, the harder you can train and the more adaptations and gains essentially you can make. And so really trying to look at all of those stones and turn them over and optimize each one. And so that's something that through my career that I feel really proud of. And if I knew I'd never make it to the games today, I would be like, damn, I fucking did everything that I could. And it just wasn't meant for me. It sucks because that's what I really wanted, but that at the same time, like I'm proud that I like stuck with it and I had that dedication and I was doing it, for myself to like just see what was possible for Alison Scudds,
If this is Alison Scudds, whenever she retires, like let's say you've retired today, what are some of those memories that are the most valuable to you? You're saying some of those impactful experiences you've had during your sport, either within or without this or outside of the sport, but during this 9 years.
Yeah, I mean, I right now at least it's kind of hard to like have specific moments. I think again, a lot of the lessons are over time and they take time to realize. And I would say that I've probably completely changed my perspective on what it means to like work after something that might be impossible. And just like always, like I feel like every season is kind of like, okay, like didn't do it. Like what can I like look at in my training and my repertoire of coaching and nutrition and training, all that stuff, like, and how can I make it better? And I think that each season, I've kind of figured out something that I'm like, okay, I feel like I could try this and hopefully that will, help improve. And I think something that's also really interesting about our sport is like how new it is. So competing at the regionals level 9 years ago was a totally different ballgame than competing at what is now called semifinals, but is pretty much the same thing as regionals this year. And so, yes, even though I haven't like broken through to that next level of the games, I know that I've gotten better each season, because if I would have been the same athlete that I was in 2016, I wouldn't even be making it to the semifinals. And so just keeping that in perspective as well is like, everybody's getting a lot better. And that's true in any sport, but specifically in sports that are so new and that there's not a ton of, training methodologies that are like proven. Like there's a lot of different, I feel like maybe at the top, more or less people are doing similar stuff, but it's not as, I don't think it would like compare to the consistency of like an endurance sport or some sort of sport that's been around for a long time.
Powerlifting was like, all right, you have German volume training, I guess,
Yeah.
is like a very, very common one. But I think most of the people that I was around, I
dabbled in the German volume training.
I saw. I saw one of your interviews or I guess one of your podcasts,
Okay.
if you will, that talked about your experience with the German volume training and running a squat program and how that changes your CrossFit's experience or your CrossFit performance.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like you're constantly having to look at specific, okay, I need to get good at my squat, so I'm going to need to sacrifice some endurance.
Yeah.
And like, okay, now my squat is at the level that I hoped that it would be at, and now I have to recover all this endurance lost. So then I need to have a lot of endurance, but then that means my volume for my squat is going to deplete a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's this constantly like slowly, hopefully increasing performance while decreasing in specific areas.
Yeah.
We always said in powerlifting, you can only get good at 2 of the 3 movements at a time. So squat will always, like it was like the last thing I was like, squat was going great for me. Bench had been stagnant for a year. And then deadlift was going pretty well. It was going all right. And it was just like frustrating, but really awesome opportunity to learn, okay, well, what am I doing inside of either my programming or my accessories or how does this increase in like force from my legs drive into my bench, right? Like, is this going to be overall beneficial? Kind of a little bit of a rant, but it seems like it's so difficult I forgot where I was going with all this, but yeah, I started off with a specific reason for talking about this, and you mentioned, and you said,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. German volume training, and so then I went on another tangent, and then before that, we talked about. Oh well, it's gone forever. If it comes back, it comes back. So, how are you? Okay, so got it. So, for like 4 days a week, we squatted. 2 days, like 3 days a week, we benched, and then 2 days a week we deadlifted at the absolute maximum. How many days per week are you looking at specific movements, or how do you categorize them? Like if I'm doing 3 powerlifting workouts, because they're more, I think it seems to be more of a broad spectrum because you have so many things to work on. It's like, okay, 2 days a week I'm doing all these stuff, 2 days a week I'm doing powerlifting stuff or strength training, and then 2 days a week I'm doing endurance. Like how does that break down?
Yeah, I think that's how we got on this topic, was because it's a new sport and there are kind of like some differences in the types of training that people do. And I actually just got a new coach, 2 coaches this year. And so my training has been a little bit different. And even before I started with those 2 new coaches, I was already kind of wanting to do things a little differently. Like, yes, I've gotten better the last couple of seasons, but I kind of felt like I was doing very similar training year round. And I felt like specifically at semifinals last year, it was really heavy. And just like we were talking about at the beginning of this, of like, if you're not strong enough, it doesn't matter how good the other stuff is, because like there's enough strength bias in it that you have to be strong enough and to even express the other stuff that you might be good at. There's
a baseline of strength that will even give you the opportunity to do the other stuff.
Exactly. And so I felt like, and had been feeling like this for a couple years, like I'm on the smaller side of female athletes who make it to the games. So last year I was like around 140 pounds. And yeah, there's probably a few athletes who make it to the games who are smaller than me, outliers and whatnot. But I'd say in general, the average body weight is around 150 pounds. There's going to be some girls that are a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. You get the point. So I was kind of like, all right, I feel like if I don't go all in on trying to get a little bit bigger, just see what happens. Like, I don't necessarily believe this is going to be like the thing, you know? But I feel like if I don't do this and, you know, I look back on my career or something, I'd be like, damn, what if I would have just like stuck with like a bulk for a little bit to just see what happens, you know? So I was like, I'm going to do it this year. And so at the end of last season, after semifinals, I took about 4 months and severely reduced my CrossFit training. I was still doing some, you know, like conditioning, probably more than most people, but like compared to like the volume that I was doing before, I was way lower. And then I was doing kind of like a West Side conjugate powerlifting style strength training. And that was it. So really reduced my volume of training, really bumped up my calorie intake. And for the first time, I had kind of done like a mini bulk before during COVID. But this was like the first time that I was able to like week after week, like put on weight. And I put on over 10 pounds during that like four months. And
that's a good weight.
Yeah, that was yeah, it was successful. And it was kind of cool, you know, to have that like goal that, you know, that getting to the games, like I said, is a little bit like not in my control. And it was cool to like have this like micro goal within my season of like, I'm going to do this. And it was something that's totally in my control, right? Like calories in, calories out, like, and, yeah, so I got up to over 150 pounds. I was like, I think at my top, like almost 155. And that was pretty cool. And it's something that's like, you know, with a training age like mine, like I'm not going to be hitting 20-pound PRs no matter what. Even if I were to stop my conditioning, only do powerlifting type stuff, I'm not going to be doing that. So, you know, maybe unless I took drugs or something, but obviously not doing that. And so it was tough. It's been tough, you know, this season to be like, okay, I'm heavier. I'm definitely stronger now. I hit quite a few PRs on my lifts. But what I really feel like is starting to happen now is that I don't know how much further my ceilings have to go up, but I feel like my floors have room to raise and get closer to those ceilings. And so every season, you know, there's kind of like an off season. And then now we're kind of getting closer to the competition season. And it's going to be different for every athlete, depending on where you're trying to peak the most at. So for me, I've always made it to semifinals. It's still tough to make it to semifinals, and I definitely have to be peaked and ready at my best for quarterfinals. But like, I need to be the best version of me at semifinals, and that's where I gotta like put all my chips in, kind of. And so the Open, which was started 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago now, I hadn't been doing a ton of like sport specific CrossFit. So I was doing kind of like the spectrum, or the ends of the spectrum of like strength, a lot of technique work in my Olympic lifting, and then like long, low intensity cardio and stuff like that. And then, you know, a couple CrossFit type workouts a week. And so now that we're kind of past that phase and we're 4 weeks out from quarterfinals and 8 weeks out from semifinals, the gears are kind of like shifting now to like more sport specific. And so now I pretty much do 2 sessions 5 days a week, and then I have 1 session 1 day a week, and then 1 full rest day. And a weakness of mine is also running, so like I'm really honing in on like 3 times a week I'm doing conditioning, running specific only. And then the other stuff, then I have 2 Oli sessions a week. One is like full snatch, power cleaning jerks. And then the other day is full cleaning jerks, power snatches. And then my third day, which was today, Sunday, I did like my deadlifts and then some like barbell cycling type stuff on those days as well. And then everything else in between there is like some sort of intervals, CrossFit or conditioning or accessories, skill, stuff like that. So that's kind of what my picture looks like at this point in the season.
It looks like right about 11 to 12 workouts a week, not including whatever you're doing for like mobility or stretching. And I know that's definitely part of it, like anything before and afterwards. I would imagine on rest days you have quite a bit of that stuff as well, or are you completely resting on that off day?
On that off day, it just kind of depends. That's kind of like my catch-up day for real life stuff. I try to be as actually restful as possible and not like pile on a ton of like work and stress and stuff like that. But that's sometimes difficult. But yeah, I think I pretty much do like mobility stuff every day. And also just knowing like I'm, like I mentioned, with different coaches this year. And so I feel like in the past I had been kind of like almost peaked throughout the year, if that makes sense. Not like totally intentionally peaked, but like doing a lot of like sport specific CrossFit stuff. And I'm hoping that this year, like having a little bit more of like progressions and like intentional work in those like long aerobic stuff, the strength stuff, the technique stuff. I'm hoping that now that we're kind of putting all that like sport specific stuff together, that's just going to like improve that. So I've actually been feeling like very fresh. And I think that's a good place for where I'm at. It's a little scary because I think as CrossFitters, you know, you kind of at least feel like you need to be like crushing yourself every day. But like, as far as like an intelligent like program goes, you have to be careful, and every athlete is going to be different too, and their ability to recover. And so I've been kind of going on walks and adding in some extra stretching, mobility, and stuff like that.
It seems like that makes like the program you're on seems like it makes the most sense in my head. Like,
I mean, yeah, again, everybody's going to have different points in their careers, different tolerances and adaptations to certain things. But yeah, I'm liking so far what we've been doing. It is a little scary because like I didn't place super well in the open, but it literally doesn't matter, like because the slate is clean now. And so it's like, I think, you know, we've had kind of like a long off season and you really want to be like, okay, like how's it all going to come together? But for me, I'm like, I'm not trying to have it come together until semifinals. And so like just being, trying to be confident in what I'm doing and knowing that like there's a purpose for things and like things are going to start slowly ramping up for that sport specific stuff, and trusting in the work that I've been doing, trusting in my coaches. That's all a big part of it, but it is all part of the mental aspect of it, you know, because it's like every chance you get, you want to be like, okay, like I'm doing great. Like I'm, you know, top 50 in the world, or I'm top 100 in the world, or, you know, like constantly gauging where you're at in the field of competitors. But I think it has taken me a while to have, I don't want to say a mature aspect of like perspective, but just knowing that like, yes, it's great to do well in the open, but it literally doesn't matter. And knowing that you can't be peaked to your best ability for, you know, what the open started in February until the end of May is when I really need to be peaked. So that's like a really long time to be peaked. And so that's not really realistic. And so
you can catch yourself at specific waves of that peak, right?
Yeah.
Like I could have a deload right before or right about that. Like since you know like the timeline, you're like, okay, I have 3 weeks. Those 3 weeks of the 24.123 are like they're workouts, and yes, they were going to require a lot, but as long as you hit 25% or top 25, you'll qualify. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I just got to show up almost, and once you're at your point where you can almost like see in the future, okay, semis is kind of more the goal than anything else. I just have to show up for these movements, and then now you can start programming. I think like those more, you become more sport specific, but then you can have like these really cool deloads where you have like a nice super compensation effect that you can like, okay, now it's 5 days, and it only becomes easier for programming than more difficult, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I was training through the open, like hitting crazy heavy squat sets, really hard conditioning pieces that you wouldn't do if you're trying to perform your best. And so just taking all those, and I think something's interesting too, like the more, into CrossFit you are too, it's easy, like it's only 3 workouts, and like there's only so many movements that can be in those 3 workouts. And the workouts that they typically program for the open are wildly different than the type of workouts that they program for semifinals. Just that's trying to be inclusive. They're trying to be, like, all the gyms have the right equipment, and a little bit more simpler workouts. And there's nothing wrong with those. I think they're incredible tests of fitness. But again, like there's certain things that just don't come up. And they're also like the types of workouts that a lot of people can kind of do well in them. There aren't as many like things that are going to hold people up. So you could be, kind of, what's the word, like, bottlenecked into like, oh, if I would have gone 5 seconds faster, that would have been 200 places better, or something like that, where it's like, are you really that much fitter if you went 2 seconds faster? Like, no, like you probably could have redone it or something, and so just keeping that in perspective. And again, it's nothing like, I mean, it would have felt great to do well in the open. I'm not trying to say like, oh, I'm glad I didn't do well in the open, but just keeping all of those things in perspective and remembering the big picture and knowing that like all of those little details, because it's easy to be like, oh, I got whatever place and that wasn't as good as last year, so like I must be a worse athlete. But I know I'm a way better athlete, and I'm excited to see how the pieces come together.
Sounds like a very healthy approach. But to be fair, 24.1 fucking murdered me.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
How was your experience?
I started off.
This was your first open, right?
This is my first open.
Let's go.
And I got, I like the first 21, and so 21 snatches, and then the 21 burpees. I mean, I flew through. I was like, this is good. This is good. Like, I'm just going to continue like this pace.
Yep.
I can manage this. And then it very, very, very quickly turned into like, oh no.
Yep.
This is not going to be okay. And my thought was, okay, I know I'm going to suck at burpees. I know that's going to be hard. Mm-hmm. But if I keep my snatches unbroken, then I should be fine. Mm-hmm. And keeping to a plan and talking to yourself in the moment of that discomfort is oddly difficult, because you can hear your voice and you know what you're supposed to do. You think you know what you're supposed to do, mm-hmm. but it's still so, like, to grab that weight and throw it again is so difficult. And I don't know. It's something that's so unique to CrossFit. Mm-hmm. In my experience, that I have not experienced in any other sport.
Like the experience of your body is screaming at you and you're like, it's 50 pounds, just pick it up kind of thing, or?
Yeah, it's like, it's only 50 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, come on, Ben.
Yeah.
Like, I could get under 700 pounds and be like, okay, like, yes, this is heavy.
Yeah.
And it's moderately scary, but I've already done all the work beforehand.
Yeah.
All I got to do is just show up, mm-hmm. and just think, breathe, execute.
Yep.
This, it's like, breathe. Yeah. Like, just constantly talking.
That's interesting. What do you remember? What you're like? You were talking about like thinking to yourself. Do you remember like what you were thinking in that workout?
I just kept on thinking, hey, you got this.
Okay.
Just keep going. Just don't stop. Just one at a time. Right. Just.
But when you had that like, oh shit moment, like what was that like?
Keep to the plan.
Okay.
That was it. Just keep to the plan. But at the same time, I had an immediate counter thought that was, but it hurts.
Yeah.
But
was it the wrong plan?
Was it?
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
Yeah.
And maybe it was the wrong plan, but I don't know another plan that would have been better.
Yeah.
Maybe just slower with both of them and just, hey, just hang out.
Yeah.
And then 24.2 was like, this is like up my alley for the most part. This is kind of nice. And then still didn't perform nearly as well as I wanted.
Yeah.
It feels like I don't know what it is. I mean, I really don't know what it is. Is it just time? Is it reps?
Mm-hmm.
Just do it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think something that's like very overlooked in CrossFit too, and any endurance sport is going to be pacing, right? And CrossFit makes it even harder because it's not, like if you're doing a triathlon or something, or just running or something, like, what running feels like at all different paces, right? And you kind of like have your repertoire of different paces that you can run at. But CrossFit's, it's always a unique combination, and so it's difficult to know your exact paces on every movement. That takes time. And that also, like, as you're coming up as an athlete, like, you're getting better too. And so, like, what used to be a good pace for you might be too slow, or the opposite of, like, you aren't sure what your pace is. So you're like, I think this is my sustainable pace. And then you do 21 and you're like, not sustainable. And so you have to really be able to, like,
abandon
abort
mission.
That one hit home.
Yeah.
So, so it's tough, and that it takes time, and it also takes fitness, really, just to like be able to recover through those lighter weights, those body weight movements, those heavier weights, and knowing the intricacies of breathing, even just technique, like I feel like I've always prided myself in moving really well, and again, been in the sport for a really long time, but I feel like there's room for me to improve there. And so there's a lot of pieces that go into that. And I think that's what makes CrossFit like a fun challenge for me is I feel like I could do it for 100 years and still find things to get better at, because there are so many things like we talked about. But yeah, I think to give you some like actual advice that you can use, I think being intentional with the workouts that you're doing. I think a lot of people will just like do a workout and spend little to no time thinking about like what that workout might feel like before they do it, coming up with a realistic game plan. And if you get it wrong, you get it wrong, like that's how you learn. And then you can use that for the next time you have, 21, 15, 9 snatches and be like, hey, I thought I could do them at this pace, but maybe that wasn't the right pace. Finding different limiters in workouts too. Like you were talking about on your 24.1, like you were like, I think I can do the snatches unbroken, but like, just because you could doesn't mean you should necessarily. And the burpees in that workout, just per rep speed or per rep cycle time, the burpees take longer, even if you're really good at burpees. And so knowing that like, okay, the burpees are going to take longer no matter what. So that's probably an area where I can lose more time as well. So even though you could rip off 21, if you did 11:10 and took a 5-second break, you'd probably feel a lot better. And then you could push more kind of in the burpees. So there is a science to pacing, breaking down workouts, figuring out what are global limiters, like a limiter, like that's going to be for everybody, like something that's going to take longer in a workout, and then like intrinsic limiters as well. Like what are you good at? What are you not as good at? And I actually have listened to the Training Think Tank podcast. I don't know if you've listened to any of their stuff, but
I've heard of them.
It's awesome, and they do a lot of stuff that's like very tactical advice for athletes of all levels. Whether you're kind of like shooting for quarterfinals or above, and so I think they do a really good job of breaking it down and yeah, like being intentional with your workouts. So like now you're like, okay, this was the first time I kind of experienced this like competition type environment, and how can I use that approach in my daily workouts and kind of like get better at that at the sport of CrossFit. My coach Jeremy Meredith, he's been talking a lot about like, I'm gonna mess up the exact verbiage, but basically like you have your level of fitness, you have your level of readiness, and then you have your level of preparedness. And so that preparedness part is how good at pacing a workout are you? Like looking at a workout and being like, I know I can do those 21 snatches at exactly this pace. If I go a second faster, I'm going to blow up. And so like having that really, really down to do for any type of workout is super important, because if you blow up in a workout, you're going to do a lot worse than is your, potential. And so especially for someone like me, who's kind of like a bubble athlete, like I need to be able to maximize every possible workout that I have. Because if I have something that I don't pace well and I place lower than I should have in that workout, then that's losing points there.
What is a bubble athlete?
Somebody who's like on the bubble of making it to the next level, essentially.
Got it.
Yeah.
On the cusp, if you will,
cusp,
or like if I look at it a
like,
bubble, or at the top of the
there's
bubble.
certain athletes that are going to be like pretty much no matter what workouts come out, even if they're having an off weekend, they're going to crush it and make it to the games no matter what. Maybe they don't do as well as they could have, but like they're probably still going to make it through. And that happens at every level. Like the open and quarters are kind of like that way for me. It's like the open definitely, because they're taking 25%. And then quarters is like a little bit more serious, because especially this year they cut down the amount of people that go to semifinals. But I think more or less everything goes according to plan. Like I should make it to semifinals, and then semis is where I really need to be like fighting for every single second, every single point.
You really got to really have to understand you.
Yeah.
You got to spend a lot of time.
Yeah.
watching.
And you have to be realistic too. And like, there's a lot of things that can be like, just like we were talking, like just because I could do it unbroken, like, is that the best way for me to get the best time in this workout? Like just because it's cool to go unbroken doesn't mean you should, And so you have to have that bigger picture in mind for sure.
I just think I look at so many videos and I'm like, oh, well, all of the people that are the best are doing most of these things unbroken. Sure, like there might be like a slight pacing, or from what it looks like on my end, on my perspective, what they're feeling is probably like, okay, I'm gonna take a couple seconds, I want to feel okay. But on my I'm like, wait, they're just fucking going straight into it.
Yeah.
Right. But most of the things that I'm looking at are unbroken. But at the same time, they also have a hell of a lot more experience than I do.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
Yeah, and I think every workout's gonna be different, and there's levels to the types of athletes there are. Like if you look at the very best, like top 3 to top 5 at the CrossFit Games, like yeah, they're going fast on everything, but they're not going fast on every workout ever programmed. But it might look like they're going fast, and not, because they're never hitting that point of like they're bent over for 35 seconds, like in a world of hurt. They're pacing it just perfectly, so they are able to maximize their performance.
It's really cool. How do you define fitness? Not how does CrossFit define fitness?
Okay.
How do you define fitness?
I mean, I would say I'm pretty bought into the way, I've drank the Kool-Aid,
Okay.
So I'm pretty like in alignment with how CrossFit defines fitness.
Okay. So then how does CrossFit define fitness?
Oh, it's constantly varied functional movements. I'd have to look it up.
In that space.
Yeah. Constantly varied functional movements, high intensity. And then there's like, I wish I would have studied before this. I sound like an idiot, but there's like 9 different aspects of fitness. There's speed, strength, agility, accuracy, flexibility, stamina, endurance. There's a couple more that I'm not quite getting there, but
it's hard to remember stuff.
Yeah.
You're focused on training.
Yeah, exactly.
You can only do so many things.
I did have my level 2 back in the day. I coached for a very long time, and I very much love and endorse all of the CrossFit like curriculum, and the stuff that they do is so awesome. And I love how they look at fitness, and they have really changed so many people's lives. So it's awesome.
I think that's one of the coolest things that I think CrossFit has. It's brought fitness into a regular conversation. It's like everybody is in some sort of way in the gym. And I attribute that success of a lot of surrounding sports, like powerlifting or weightlifting, or I'm sure there's other sports as well, from what CrossFit's been able to do. They just have such a large presence that it doesn't matter if you love or hate them. They have brought access to gyms and facilities and to community really quite well.
Yeah, I think that's something that CrossFit just is a center to their identity, is that community. And they've really like created those environments where people not only, like going to the gym is very intimidating, and going to a CrossFit gym is intimidating too. But like when you go to a CrossFit gym, if it's a good gym, like you have coaches there that are helping you along the way. And so I think that is a really cool aspect, that it's universally scalable, and so like if you have a good coach, they're able to help you, come in day one and like still get a great workout as a games level athlete. And just the community aspect of it, I think, humans are communal creatures. And so having that level of accountability and support from your peers and coaches and friends and stuff is just awesome. And that, we've all had a day where we are working out with a buddy, and it's like you feel like that much more excited and the fun aspect of it.
I think you and Raf really embodied that. I first got to the gym and it felt very, I don't know, kind of distant, like, oh shit, like what am I doing here? Like this is not really my space. I want to learn, I want to grow, but really not sure where to go. And you two were like, hey, how's it going? And I was like, hey, like the first people that have really like talked to me in the gym. Like that's,
yeah, thank you.
It was really, really quite sweet. Like it was,
him and I have been coaches for a long time too. So I think we know the value of that, and we just see that. Like some people just aren't aware of that. And he was like an affiliate manager for a while, and I came from a really good affiliate back in Miami, Peak 360 CrossFit, and I feel very fortunate to have like learned how to coach there and been a part of their community. And we just know like how important that is, and good that makes people feel too, like welcomed. And it's different and better than a Globo gym because of that reason. You're not just coming in, putting in your headphones and like head down, not talking to anybody.
At the same time, I do like sometimes putting my headphones on.
Yeah, of course.
And getting a heavy squat.
Totally. Yeah. But it's not like you've been coming to the gym for 3 months and nobody knows your name. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that would be a very unfortunate reality.
Right. And that is the reality of a lot of gyms. It's like just a different culture. And I feel like could be a very great thing for a lot of people.
I think fitness, I think we both have been in this field, in this practice for a long time, and so I think we can both fitness has been an opportunity that's changed my life in more ways than just like staying in shape. It's created friendships. It's like led me down the path of going to get my master's degree, like, or even going to school in the first place. Like I never would have done any of that if it wasn't for a sport, for being in the gym with people and friends and finding relationships, and like the things that are like found in the gym are beautiful things. Yeah, I agree. It's made me, I think, a better human being overall. Like, what does it take to be consistent inside of something and really understand delayed gratification? Yeah. And at the same time, it's also forced me to grow in a way that was not associating my entire self-worth with a particular sport. When I left the sport of powerlifting, I was like, I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what to do. I felt so lost, and I had no friends, and I was like, this is really quite scary. And so like it made me like take a step back and was like, okay, this is maybe more global. And we're not just a powerlifter. We like to be in the gym. And like, okay, well, there's a large community for that. And like, take some steps back so that you can hopefully like realign and then set back up into a new position that will allow me to have some success. So it was like, yes, the gym. Okay, maybe MMA. No, not MMA. Okay, maybe this. Okay, no, maybe CrossFit. And it's like, okay, CrossFit's been something that I can find value in, something that I can find consistency in, and then slowly growing into that, I guess, that personality or into that community. I think it's very nice. And you had it seems like you have a similar experience going from one sport to another.
Yeah, I started in competitive all-star cheerleading. Well, when I was younger, that was like my first like main sport. When I was in high school, I kind of dabbled in a lot of sports just because I liked playing sports and doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, I did competitive all-star cheerleading for about 10 years. And then I felt like I kind of reached my goal doing that. It was like my childhood dream to be on a team called Top Gun All-Stars. They're like one of the best programs in the world for competitive cheerleading. And they're in Miami. That's why I moved down to Miami from Ohio to cheer on Top Gun. And after one season, I was kind of like, yep, I feel like I did it. And I didn't have like that drive to like really want to go any further. And there isn't much further to go. Like we didn't win worlds that year. So I would have loved to be a world champion, but it wasn't in the cards for that year. And we still competed at a really high level. And I felt like I had kind of like moved on as well. So yeah, I was kind of just like working out to stay in shape. And then I found CrossFit, and it was basically love at first sight. I went to a competition before I had even like started training CrossFit specifically. Like I was doing, circuits and, kind of like CrossFit-y type of stuff in the gym, spin classes and whatnot. But I went to a CrossFit competition, Wadapalooza, back in the day before it was what it is today. And I saw some girls doing like box jumps and bar muscle ups, and I was like, that I need to do that. Like I'm competing in CrossFit. Like before I even did one CrossFit cool. workout.
That's cool.
And so for me, like that obviously doesn't happen to everybody. And but yeah, I was just like, yep, this is it. And yeah, that is
love at first sight.
That is love at first sight.
What is like fitness brain to you? Like the end of a workout, do you ever feel like it's hard for you to like catch words or think about anything that's like difficult ever? Like,
I think the hardest thing in certain workouts is like the math. Like if you're having to do like math of like, oh, and this was actually something funny that I didn't realize had been such a developed skill of mine until I was helping my mom just like started getting into rowing. Like I bought her a rower last year, and I was like writing her a workout, and she was like, what does any of this mean? And she's like so overwhelmed with like having to like have split times and like look at her paces, and like so all of that like computation that's kind of going on that feels like kind of second nature when I'm doing a workout. But it can definitely get very difficult in a hard workout. Like if you're having to, say you have to do like a round of something and then rest 1-to-1, and then you have to do the math of like, okay, well, if I finished at 345, what's 345 plus 345, and usually it's not like as cut and clean as that, but stuff like that, or like counting reps is sometimes hard. But luckily in a competition, you have a judge counting for you, and you don't have to do a lot of thinking. But yeah, I would say that's the hardest thing to do when I'm tired is math.
Counting is oddly difficult. Like,
yeah. Especially movement that's like very slow. Like something that's taking long, like for example, maybe like burpee box jumps, right? Like each rep is going to take you about 5 to 6 seconds. And if you're getting like, if you have to do a really high number of those, you can start to like project, okay, like in 5 more, I'm going to be at 30. And then you're like, wait, am I at 30 or was I about to be at 30? And so those kind of like mind tricks and stuff.
Sometimes I'll go from like 1, 2, 3, 5, 9, 6.
Yeah.
Fuck, where was I?
I'd say typically if you're unsure about what number you're at, you're probably at the lower number.
Traditionally.
That's good. That's a good rule of thumb, I think, to use.
What was your experience like studying? You didn't choose an easy degree.
No.
Why?
I think something that has guided me throughout my entire life is I just like challenges. I like trying to do stuff that sounds really hard. And so my degree is in biomedical engineering, and I obviously had like a preference for science and math. Like those were just things that I really liked in high school. And I had some really good physics and anatomy and math teachers that kind of set me up for that. And I was like, that sounds sweet. Like, I want to try to do that, you know? Like, how badass does that sound? And it was fucking hard. It was so hard. And like, I also like, I feel like my high school did not prepare me for like college. I was the valedictorian at my high school, actually. And I'm not saying that as a brag. I'm saying that because I failed a class my first year of college. And not because I wasn't trying. Like, I was studying so hard. I wasn't at the like starting level of knowledge that I needed to be at for that math class. I got a D, but I didn't totally fail it. But I was luckily able to retake it. But it was just like this, like such a wake up moment of like, I don't know how to study. Like, I've basically just gone to class, you know, been a good student, like done my homework, and I got straight A's, you know? And so like that whole aspect of like studying was very a rude awakening when I first started college, because it's like, well, everybody at college is, you know, top of their class pretty much then.
Shit. Yeah. Sure. It depends on the college you go to.
I felt like at my school they were, like University of Miami, it was like a very, like, I felt like I was, like we were talking about before, like I did not feel like genetically gifted, and I was like, I am working my ass off for some people who are just like, oh yeah, like barely studying and like passing with flying colors. So
there was definitely those people at A&M as well, but I think it was more like self-inflicted. I was not the most studious individual. I was so focused on like trying to do stuff in the lab, or I started working in a genetics research lab, and then
that's awesome.
I did powerlifting, and like I was like, I just came from Team USA. Like, I'm not gonna go. Like, I'm just gonna go to powerlifting and go to the lab. Like, I don't need school.
Yeah,
like, that's not interesting. And so I did much worse than you did. I actually ended with like a 0.6 GPA after my first semester.
Okay.
0.6.
That's like D's in all the classes, right?
A couple F's, I think.
Okay.
In some places. Yeah.
I didn't even know that was possible.
Oh, it's possible. But I had no interest.
Were you paying for your own school?
Yes.
Damn, that's even more impressive that you failed that bad.
A lot, it was tough.
I was gonna say, maybe you were just like, mom and dad got me. Like, I don't really care. I felt like that was part of the reason why I was so driven, because I was like, I am in so much fucking debt. Like, I need to like get this right, or it's like all for nothing. Who would have knew that it was all for nothing anyways? But I at least got the piece of paper.
That's what matters, I think. That's what they say.
Yeah,
you know?
Maybe, something like that.
Maybe one day you'll use it?
Maybe.
Do you think you'll ever will?
I mean, I don't know. Like, the field is definitely still interesting to me, and, you know, the challenge of it as well. And there's a lot of like routes you can go, but I'm like, could I even like, I graduated 10 years ago. I don't remember shit. Like, hire me, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe some of my like friends that I went to school with that are now like, they've worked their way up 10 years. They'll give me the pity hire or something.
We can put you in one of these offices here.
Yeah.
And maybe hopefully you can learn something.
Yeah. Who knows where the world will take me, but.
Hey, what do you want? Where do you want the world to take you? Or like, how do you know, we were talking earlier about living life by design. And so far you've created this design. What's the next? Are you thinking about the next design?
I think it's a tough thing, because I think that in general in my life so far, in my 31 years, like I've felt very driven by specific goals. Like when I was younger, I wanted to, you know, be the valedictorian and then go to Top Gun. And when I got to Top Gun, I felt like I did that, and then I wanted to get through school, and I like made it through school. And then after school, I was like, all right, I'm going to like choose to go all in on becoming an athlete and see where it takes me. If I can, you know, sustain myself and make somewhat of a living, and just kind of like see where that goes. And then like it just kept on working out season after season. And I've had some like really incredible like opportunities throughout that time that I didn't expect as well. And I still feel very dedicated to like seeing this goal through of making it to the games. And so it's really hard for me to project after that, because I feel like a lot of the things that are after that are not being an athlete anymore. And because it truly is like a full-time thing, more than a full-time job, because it's like I have a rest day from the gym, but like we were talking about, there's still like recovery, there's still nutrition, like there's still sleep, there's still mindset work, like all of that stuff never stops. And there's certain people that can do it like part-time and still have really good success, but where I'm at so far, like I was telling you before, is like I don't want to have any regrets and be like, oh, if I would have just like been all in, what could have happened, Like looking back, I'm like, I was all in, and like that was the best I could do. And so I truly feel like living through that right now is where I'm at. And there's a lot of things, that I feel like could be kind of like next chapters. But again, it's tough for me to be like, okay, this is my specific goal for after competing, because I don't know when after competing is. And, like, for example, like having kids, like, yeah, there are some amazing female athletes out there who have had kids and then come back and crush it. But like, I feel like they're kind of the outliers. And for most people, especially athletes my age, like, I don't know if I'm having a kid and then coming back from it. Maybe I am. Like, maybe I would surprise myself, but it doesn't feel like the smartest thing to do if you're trying to peak your athleticness, at least where my priorities are. Like, that's something to me that kind of feels like that will probably be like the end of my athletic career. And that's something that's very unique, to being a woman. And it's something that you truly never know.
That is a very, I would imagine, I don't know, as a through an outside perspective, a difficult internal clock to like, okay, if is this something I want for my life? Having a kid is something I want, then biologically have a time clock of the ideal timeline, but I have this goal that I still really want to achieve.
Yeah.
What's gonna take the priority?
Yeah, totally.
Like that's an odd pressure. It's a unique pressure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think, like I was saying before, like there are so many amazing female athletes that have done it and like are proving, that there's no limit to that. And but it's just like something for me that like I have belief in myself that I could do it, but again, like going back to like trying to just like turn over every stone and like maximize everything that I possibly could, that is just like not a priority for me right now, or something I would like want to try, I guess. But who knows, that could change. My perspective could change in the next couple years, or I could be, who knows?
What is retired, like 60-year-old, 70-year-old Allie want to do? Can you see like, okay, life's you're at your last couple like decades. What do you see yourself doing? Are you at the beach and hanging out? Are you in the mountains hanging out? Are you doing something that's nonprofit associated or not? Or where are you at?
I feel like I'm the type of person that I view myself that I would always be doing something. I like working. I like helping people. I like all of those things. And, it's hard to say another lifetime from now for me, 30 years from now, like how my perspective would change. But I definitely don't see myself like some people are like, oh, I never want to work a day in my life, and it's maybe because I haven't had a type of job that like is very, that I like, I love doing what I do, and it is like really hard work, and there are nuances to it, of course, but like it doesn't feel like I'm like forcing myself to do something so then later I can relax. Like I feel like I'm making ends meet, like financially trying to. It's tough in CrossFit because there's not a lot of money in the space, but have been lucky with sponsors and different opportunities that I've had there. And that's like a whole other aspect, I think, to being an athlete as well, is like there is so little money in the sport, and that really does add a burden and a stress to your life of like, okay, how am I going to like make money? Because it's like I'm working really hard. I'm working more than a full-time job, and I'm making $0, from the sport itself.
Yeah.
And, again, been lucky with sponsorships and things like that. And it's like, it's that the work that I'm doing is kind of getting rewarded from those sponsors and stuff, but it's not direct. It's not like you're, working your job, your 9 to 5, and you get the same paycheck every week. And of course, you could get laid off, and there's whatever, like, again, nuance to all of those situations, but it is a unique part of the stress of the job.
It is a very unique stress of the job.
Mm-hmm.
It is finding people that support you or believe in you enough that they're like, yeah, continue to do what you do. Just here's not all sponsorships are financial, right? Some sponsorships are purely just like, we'll give you a free gym membership, right? Or some people sponsors or training or whatever it may be. Like, in the world of sponsorships, it could be quite vast in terms of the output that the sponsor is giving.
Sure, yeah. And I think you just have to, weigh for yourself, like, is the work that you're putting in for that worth whatever they're giving you? And just knowing your value that you're providing as well, because oftentimes, like, most of the sponsorships that I've done with are like some sort of like, marketing, essentially. Like, a company is paying you to promote their product or service, and you promote their product or service, they make money, and then they give you money. And like, social media is kind of like a really interesting landscape for that as well. And it's, even that over the last 10 years is new and growing and changing and all of that stuff. And each deal is a little different. And I've always prided myself on working with companies that, like, I actually really love and like use and would be like a customer or user of the product, even if I wasn't sponsored, because I think it's really easy to see through that, when people are just pushing products for the paycheck, and it's like they're not using that, or you see them using like a different supplement that then they're promoting like at competitions and stuff, and it's just like, I get that you got to do what you got to do to pay the bills, right? But that's something I've tried to stay true to, and like, I've also had some really amazing opportunities through some of those sponsorships throughout the years. I was working with an apparel company where I got to actually like design some clothing lines with them, and that was like kind of this whole hidden passion of mine that I got to uncover, and was really fulfilling, and I just love doing that. So I could see myself doing that either with another company down the road or potentially my own. Just because I really love doing that.
It seems like such an opportunity for like a creative outlet.
Oh yeah, it's so true. And I think that, like, I studied science, and I'm definitely a very analytical person, but I definitely have that like creative side. So it's good to have like certain outlets for that too.
Have you ever, I think we're getting more into the business side of things,
Mm-hmm.
but have you ever worked with like brand managers or athlete managers or things like that?
I have. Yeah, when I was first starting out in CrossFit, I had a friend of mine who was kind of like helping me with like certain deals. And I think there's definitely is some value in working with someone like that who can, for a couple of reasons, like there's like the networking aspect. So like they know people that they can connect you with. And then on the other side, there's like the contracts. So they can deal with the negotiations, the legal mumbo jumbo, all of that stuff. But I will say from my experience, like, I think for myself, I just wanted to be more take more accountability. And I felt like, again, the value that I was getting wasn't worth what it was costing me. And so I felt like, and this was like after years. So I definitely like learned a lot and was able to create more connections. And I just felt like it was, for me personally, it worked out better to handle the deals by myself. I felt like it was a better connection with the companies. And I felt like they respected that as well. And I'm also very like, I'm good at that kind of stuff. Like I have no problem having a direct conversation with people, strong communicator, and all of those things. So I think it just worked out well for me to like be able to handle some of that stuff on my own.
I listen to a lot of entertainers on different podcasts, like a lot of comedians. I watch a lot of comedy podcasts, and they talk a lot about their comedy manager, their business managers, and then agents.
Yeah.
And how at one point it was almost like a necessity to have an agent. And then social media and YouTube existed, and now there was less and less of a need for those individuals. And now it's just like, okay, create a good product, right? Tell good jokes.
Yeah.
Have a good podcast, and people will find it. And I'm sure there's more behind the scenes that goes into like how do you market and how do you plan like those,
PR and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Who's like, there are people that can get you onto podcasts that will help push numbers in certain places. Do you have a desire to continue to grow in those spaces, or are you, because there's a lot to manage.
Yeah.
Like there's the athlete side that we talked about for all this majority of the time.
Yeah.
And then there's this other side of it that it's like, okay, well, I also want to live too.
Yeah.
And I could be there's a girl, and I'm going to probably butcher it. Danielle. Is that a girl? I think she has tattoos. Okay, is that a girl? Okay.
Does there a girl exist whose name is Danielle?
Let us know.
I
in the
think you're talking
comments.
about Danielle Brandon.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So
she does exist.
Yes. Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
And there's another one, Brooklyn Wells. Or I think
Brooke Wells. Yeah.
Brooke Wells. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. You're good.
This is not my space. Okay. All right. But these people also have a significant following that I would imagine they're using their platforms as a leverage to gain more financial income. Either that's through
I think most athletes are attempting to do that at some level,
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it your goal to continue to push that side? And if so, then how do you contribute your time to that side?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that I feel like this season specifically I've been really not struggling with, but like working on and trying to figure out what that balance is, because it is tough. And I think there's seasons of everything. And, I think when CrossFit was a little bit newer, like more companies were wanting to like invest in like the influencers and athletes and stuff like that. And just from my perspective, it feels like companies are wanting to do less of that. There are definitely still some opportunities out there. And, I try to have some sort of like structure on how I reach out to companies and try to have somewhat of a system to do that somewhat regularly. But it is a tough balance, and I haven't really found like the perfect system for that, or had like particularly good luck this year as well. And I think it's a little bit of timing and luck when it comes to those brand deals. And there's a lot of things that go into it too, like what the brand is like, what types of athletes the brand is looking to invest in, and kind of like what their goals are, and if their company, like I said, like aligns with like things that I think are important and are useful for me and my audience. And, that authenticity is a really important part also. And so like, I don't like to do deals that are super like, oh, you have to like push this code like 8 times a month, because then it's like I lose my self brand identity, and is that worth it for me? Those are kind of like all questions that I try to ask myself. And so what I've been doing is just trying to stay as consistent and relevant on social media, as I can, even though there is like very much like authenticity is like at the forefront, you still have to like plan for that. And like, you can't just like hope that something inspires you to like share something. There definitely has to be like thought and planning there. And that's a whole other thing of, you know, being an athlete too, is like managing that social media side and creating content and putting yourself out there and figuring out what people, you know, are interested to hear in, and sharing my story. And I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but that's kind of like,
I think it's still online.
Yeah, I think all of those things kind of go into, you know, kind of having a self brand, right? That is valuable, that can then be used by companies who then pay you.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, like the apparel deal that I had was so awesome, because I felt like it was really truly like a win-win, because like I was creating these products and I was doing like start to finish on these lines. So like I would come up with like product ideation, I would do all of the testing, all of the like alterations that needed to be done,
Wow.
you know, sending feedback to like the manufacturers, and then picking out the colors, picking out the theme for the line, like making it like a complete, you know, capsule, doing the photo shoots, doing some of the, you know, like deliverables, doing the copy for like how to like explain what the sports bra is on the website, a lot of that stuff. And I really liked doing that, you know, like I feel like I have a strength of like attention to detail. And so I really liked doing that and creating the hang tags. And so I felt very invested, and it was a lot of work, but it was very rewarding, financially, and also just like fulfillment to like see, like getting to share like these pieces that I created for women to feel like strong and sexy in the gym, but we're also like super functional to do like badass workouts in.
What an amazing experience, really.
Yeah,
Like,
it truly was.
You got to see product development, see a project all the way through it. Like, communicating with manufacturers in itself is a really fun opportunity that I think a lot of people, they get to see the product at the end of the day, and they don't realize how many conversations, how many emails, or how like just the thought process that went behind the creation of this product.
Totally.
Like, it's a higher level of thought and process, and it's I think, even if you don't see, like, yes, there is a benefit then, but I think that those, like, there are always transferable skills that I think we get out of most things. The transferable skills you get out of that out of that experience will probably benefit you for the rest of your life. Yeah,
I hope so. And I would, like I said before, I would love to do something similar. If there are any apparel brands out there that want to have a super successful clothing line with me, hit me up.
Shouts out.
And, you know, it's something that me and Raph actually kind of looked into doing our own thing this year. But again, it just kind of came back to like, yeah, we could do it, but like at what cost to the training? And there's a million different ways you could go about it as well, like being as involved or not as involved as possible. But it just didn't feel right for this year. And I was worried that, again, it would take away something. Like I would get into the thick of it and be like, well, this has to work out, you know, because I'm invested financially and, you know, want to see it through, but like at what cost of my training? And then, you know, having potentially the regret of like, like that wasn't a good idea. Like it either A, wasn't successful because I couldn't sacrifice enough time and, you know, effort to put into it, or B, it was successful, but then, you know, my training tanked or something like that. So I just kind of decided to put that on the side burner for now.
It seems like you got a lot of like really cool opportunities, and the focus and dedication towards your sport is admirable, and it's not easy by any means.
Thank you.
And I think that, and I hope that a lot of people can recognize and like feel that. I don't know. It makes me feel like I don't know, like this person has a lot of passion for what they're doing and is willing to sacrifice these other things that people maybe have dreams to do. And yes, the opportunity is there, but it's not the right time because it's going to impede on the primary goal.
Yeah, I think that is something that is a life lesson, I guess, that I've been teaching myself, is like, you gotta make the main thing, and like it's easy to get distracted and have too much going on and be like kind of not half-assing everything, but we all only have so much energy, time, and willpower, and so I think for me, it's just like, yeah, that's my main thing, and try to live a balanced life outside of that. And obviously, like everybody got bills to pay and stuff like that, but trying to make it make sense with what my main goals are, because, I feel like I've said this a million times, but like I truly want to, like, when I'm done competing, like I want to be like, yep, I did it, like, and it is like gave my full effort. And I think honestly, like we talked about like the self-value at the beginning of this, of like, I know that I would feel good with that no matter what the outcome of my, like best performance ever is. Like none of that stuff I don't think is ever going to feel good is like the commitment and dedication that I had my whole career. And that is something that I'm just like really proud of. And even though it's not as sexy as making it to the CrossFit Games or winning a competition or something like that, intrinsically for myself, I know what I did, and I know how hard I worked, and I know what I did. And like for me, like giving my best effort for, almost a decade now, I think that's pretty cool.
I have so much love for that thought process.
Thank you.
I mean, so much love. And I think not only I think there's, I think we hear a lot, like motivation is very like, is in a flash, right? Mm-hmm. It happens at one point, you get motivated, and then now what do you do with it?
Yep.
And you've taken that and turned it into this fulfilling experience that, we get this one opportunity to exist in this world, and you are squeezing every fucking ounce of juice that you can out of that lemon, that lime, that whatever your choice of fruit is. But it's just, I can look at my own life and think, man, like there are so many other things that I could have been doing, but instead decided to focus on this one thing. Or in moments in life, it's like, man, I should have just focused on one thing. And there's not a time that it's like, well, it's too late. It's like, well, no, there's probably that thing that's still on the pan that you could either, if you really, really wanted to, like really dive into and make something out of it. Yeah. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you'll learn so much.
Yeah. And I think, probably some people would look at my career and, where I'm at and be like, oh, just like, give it a rest, like you tried so many times and you failed, and like, you're probably not going to make it. And like, I even say that to myself sometimes, like, we all have those like inner demons, and just bringing it back around to like, I love the training. I love challenging myself and pushing myself to like my physical and mental limits and beyond, and that's still doing it for me. And for as long as that's filling that cup, and I think that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, and I'm enjoying it and having a good time, and that's what life's all about.
I love it. I have two more questions, then we can call it a day if that's okay with you.
Of
what was it like growing up in Ohio? Like, what were your
corn? Lots of corn.
Lots of corn. Okay, good to know. Okay,
just
good.
Kidding.
I'm sure
it's funny because, well, I'll finish this thought. It's funny that you asked me that, because I went to school in Miami, Florida, and students from all over the U.S., but like anytime I would say I'm from Ohio, they're like, oh, like, did you grow up on a farm? And I'm like, no. There are lots of farms in Ohio, to be fair, lots of corn. But I grew up in Columbus, which is a pretty big city, and it was normal.
So what was home
Not to say
like?
that living on a farm isn't normal. I don't want to offend anybody living on a farm, you know?
What do your parents do? Were they supportive? I guess first one thing at a time, but I'm going to go down like the history of your family if you don't mind.
Yeah.
But like, okay, so what did your parents do and how was home life like? What was home life?
My parents are incredibly supportive and have been my entire life. They were a little older when they had me, so they're both retired now. My dad is 71 and my mom is 68, I think, or about to turn 68. They are some of the most hardworking people I've ever met. They both came from really poor families and kind of just like worked themselves to, you know, like the life that I got to have. And so competitive cheerleading is a very expensive sport. It's not like part of school. It's like completely outside. There's traveling involved with it. There's competition fees. There's gym fees. It's year round. So there's like, it's expensive. And so they both worked full-time jobs. My dad was like an electrician / IT kind of guy. He worked at a few different places doing that, different prisons and stuff. And then my mom was kind of like administrative, like secretarial, like payroll kind of like office stuff. She worked for a few different companies as well, managing and stuff like that. And then on top of that, when I was in competitive cheerleading, they also worked like these fundraising events. So they would work their full-time job and then leave and then go work like these sporting events, like selling hot dogs and stuff, like literally to like make money so I could do cheerleading. So
that's awesome. They
were so amazing. And I think back to like some of the stuff that they did and I'm just like, wow, like it's amazing. And they're both still super supportive of, you know, what I do. I paid for my school myself or, took loans out to do that, but they were super supportive. And even when I was like, hey, I'm going to like try to exercise full time, they were super supportive of that. My dad at first, he didn't like CrossFit because he didn't understand it, but now he's like, once he came to his first competition and he came to my gym, he was like, he loved it. He's like, this is the coolest thing ever. He actually did CrossFit for a little bit.
That's cool.
And, so very hardworking, very supportive. And did you ask me what they're doing now? They're both retired.
I didn't, but that's cool too.
Yeah, they're both retired and living the dream. My dad plays disc golf and regular golf every day.
Hell yeah.
My mom has been struggling with some health issues, but she's been doing amazing this last year. So I got her the rower, and that's been like awesome for her health and mindset and all of that.
I think part of the reason I ask is because the strong sense of intrinsic value, or learning how to value intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
Is if we go through like the understanding of psychology and the impact that our parents have.
Yeah.
I wanted to, they have such a large influence on those things.
Totally. Yeah.
And you speak very highly of them. And so it's just, it sounds like that they were really good parents.
Yeah, they were amazing. The best parents I've ever had. No, but I think a lot of, especially about my mom, like she definitely is the one that taught me like whatever I want to do, like I can do that, and like, so I think that's really like guided me through my whole life and given me the confidence to like just figure stuff out, and like empower me to like make choices and fail, and it's okay to fail, and it's like you're smart enough, you're strong enough, like you're gonna figure this out. If anybody can do it, it's you, like that kind of like confidence building as a kid. And yeah, that really is like who I am today, and so I'm really grateful for that.
Last question. Thank you.
And she's still teaching me things. I just wanted to add this. Like,
Please.
she, like I said, has kind of been struggling with her health, and as somebody who's like very health and fitness conscious, like that's just not something that they had. Either my parents had growing up. Like, my mom, was born in the 50s, like didn't like super small town in Ohio, not a farm, but like might as well have been a farm. And she like didn't even know that women like went to college, like that generation, that kind of like era of like thinking. And, she had my sister when she was like still in high school and had kid every decade, basically raised kids her entire life and always put them first. And so didn't put herself first in a lot of things. And, unfortunately that kind of catches up on you when you're older. And she's now like trying to like find her, what makes sense for her and her health. And, for me, it's easy to just be like, well, you just like eat healthy and work out, like, cause that's like all I've known. And so through, it's been a hard time for us because, I love her so much. And like, it's very scary to see your parents ill and, have these health scares, and for things that feel like not preventable, because like I know I'm not like naive to think that like, oh, she just needs to eat healthy and all of her ailments will go away. But like, to just like, sometimes I just want to be like, oh, just like do it, like just eat healthy. It's so frustrating. And she's taught me so much these last couple years through that struggle of just like, people are, no matter what we want them to do, like they have to choose for themselves. And like, I try to just be supportive and helpful and encouraging however I can. And so she continues to like teach me things that way as well. And sometimes they're tough lessons, but
you can't control people's actions as much as you want.
Yeah.
I used to have a lot of anxiety about relationships and specifically like with infidelity.
Yeah.
And it was a therapist that was like, you know what? If they're going to cheat, they're going to cheat.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
Yep.
Like, you'll know where they stand.
Yeah.
But this constant worrying every single day that this is going to be a reality is driving you insane.
And it's so hard for the people that you love, because you're like, I want you to like be what I want you to be, and you have to like let that go.
With other people, it should be like, I don't really like them. I'm not going to hang out with them anymore.
Yeah. Totally.
They could do them. That's fine.
Yeah.
But for family, it's and for people that you love in general, it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
It is tough. I guess 2 questions, because I thought about the other one as we were doing this.
Yep.
What is the meaning of life?
I think the meaning of life is to enjoy yourself, help other people, and leave it better than you found it.
What is some advice that you give to 16-year-old Allie?
I think just like I said, I feel very fortunate that I had like a lot of confidence. I've always had a lot of confidence in myself, and I don't know if I would really change a lot of what I did, and like go back and be like, oh, definitely do or don't do this thing, like I feel very proud of like the journey that I've been on, and I think I needed to have certain lessons that I had to become the person that I am today. So I think I would probably just be encouraging, and I think something that I'm like kind of working on in general is like I'm a very like high stressed person, and so like recognizing that maybe a little bit earlier on could have like helped me more. And but I think that's always a work in progress, because to be disciplined and successful or whatever, like you kind of need a level of stress, but finding that balance is super important. And maybe there I've read a lot of like mindset books in the last probably like 5 to 10 years, and I think those have been like very helpful. I feel like I've always been kind of like a student of everything. Like I like to learn about everything. And so just like encouraging more of that like sooner, because I think like communication and mindset is not something that like my parents had strengths in, if anything. And I think it's funny, like my brother, he's 8 years older than me, and we've kind of like, help each other with our parents and their communication and their health and all of that stuff. And we're like, yeah, I think we just got like, we saw that they weren't like the best communicators with one another. And we were like, okay, we're going to do the exact opposite of that and be like over communicators. So just like, I feel like I've learned a lot about that in my more adult years. So maybe learning that sooner.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. Plug, promote, anything you want. Where can people find you? Do all the things?
Yeah, you can find me mostly at Instagram. All of my usernames, I think, are the same. Scudds, Scudds, Scudds like the missile. Yeah, mostly on Instagram. I love chatting to people. I'm very open with my audience. Shoot me a DM. Like I try to answer all my DMs and my comments and all of that good stuff. I have a few, like if you're wanting to look through the archives, I have some old vlogs on YouTube. I loved doing the vlogs, but much like you were talking about with the podcast, like the editing side is like a huge part of that. And so I haven't been super consistent or up with that. But yeah, hit me up on Instagram.
Beautiful. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Ben Navarro's podcast. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, and all other major podcast hosting platforms. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes.